Well, welcome everyone to Personality Yoda. Good to have you with us again, whether you're watching live or whether you're catching up on demand. But this, believe it or not, is the last in the series of the Five Voices interviews. And we've obviously saved the best till last because I'm going to introduce you to a Guardian connector by the name of Rachel Montgomery. So Rachel, thank you for agreeing to be my special guest today. I'm trying to find Guardian connectors that are prepared to commit to a time and talk about things rather than just being out having adventures out in the world. Rachel, is a challenge. So thank you for representing your personality today. So thank you.
You're more than welcome, and I'm truly excited to actually be part of this and share with the world, how important these tools really are.
Oh, thanks, Rachel. Well, some of you will already detect that Rachel probably has a strange accent. And I'll let her tell a little bit more about you. But that wasn't deep south, just in case you're wondering, on the other side of the pond. It's deep north, I think, of UK. But Rachel, I always ask people, just tell us a bit about you. Tell us a bit about your upbringing, what grew up, what shaped you. Give everyone just a chance to get to know who this amazing lady is today.
I grew up in the west coast of Scotland on the Ayrshire coast, and I was the oldest of three girls, very close in age, the three of us were. I think my youngest sister is only about 2.5 years younger than me, and there's another one in the middle. So quite close, very close, and an academic family, but I was severely dyslexic. And I think that has very much shaped who I am today. And the passions around actually helping people with around communication, how to communicate. Some people think that dyslexia is just a reading and writing issue. It's an information processing issue. So working memory, just interacting with the world around you. So I always felt very different growing up. It wasn't something that was discussed back then. So, so problem solving became a fact of life for me. It's something that I always had to do. So I was quite surprised actually that it was actually also a personality and it wasn't just something that I was forced into. So, and life I was always a bit lost. It was always a case of, I know exactly what I'm bad at because I got told it all the time. So I think I probably spent my teenage years and my 20s and probably a good part of the half of my 30s at least trying to find out exactly what it is that I'm good at. What am I made for? I left school at 15. I did get my GCSEs, some of them. But I was more passionate about sport, socializing with people, being out and about. But having come from an academic family, it's a case of, well, what do we do with Rachel? And I was then suggested that I was a nursery nurse. I was good with children. But if anybody knows Guardian connectors, that's draining. But it gave me the ability to leave home. And then I was nannying for families. I moved down to London, and I was nannying for families who ran businesses. So that's how I then got into business. It was a management consultant herself said, I'll put you through college and you can be my PA and I'll teach you everything about business.
Wow.
So, and then I married and had my son before 25. And I was still lost, still very lost. And I thought, maybe it's the corporate world I need to get into. Because that's what most of my family were doing. And if you don't have somebody, this is why it's so important to have a coach or a mentor or somebody who you can look up to and who is able to show you the way. It's so important as far as your strengths are concerned. And then we got to the height of the crash. I ended up working for a bank and doing sales. Sales is second nature to me if it's relational sales rather than transactional sales. And I did that for a while. And then it was the height of the financial crash. My husband was made redundant. I was not happy in the bank. And so we decided to set up a sales company. So outsourcing sales. And with the networking that I was doing, I came across financial sector, insurance companies, where mortgage brokers were all going broke at the time. And it was a case of, how do we sell insurances a different way? So it was all that new learning curve of how do we do things different. So we set up a company and then doing the sales, but then we eventually set up a call center.
Right.
My husband is a creative pioneer. So he is always conceptual, and actually doing the 5 voices has made us realize why and how we worked together or didn't work together, as the case may be, as we increased with staff. So we ended up running with 15 to 20 staff, working with some of the biggest names within the financial sector. So, but again, I ended up fulfilling people's needs. I was always a problem solver, and it was a case of we looked at an empty office. We had about 4 staff at the time, and we were trying to get dialer systems in. And it was a case of, well, how do we do this? Oh, Rachel will fix it. So I had to learn all the technology side of it, and it was to the standard of a bank. It had to be of high standard. Anything that I do, it has to be the best of the best. No investors at all. It was just my husband and myself slowly increasing the business. And then we ended up going into recruitment as well, because when I ever needed to recruit, I was so fed up of the recruitment services that were out there, just not really doing it correctly. So we ended up doing that as well. And, fast forward 10, 12, 13 years now, husband and myself, we realized we have very different skill sets. He is the creative, he is the conceptual thinker. And I then put that into a process. But the 5 voices has given us an understanding of what I used to find really annoying is actually his, he can see unintended consequences way into the future, whereas I'm looking at the here and now, and I'm looking at the systems and processes that are needed for success. So I didn't always trust his away into the future thought processes. But now that I understand the stress that he must have gone through, because everything that he said eventually came true. But if you're going by voice strength, I was the loudest voice. So it was always a case of whoever's the loudest wins. And that's not great. But,
so good. So Rachel, I mean, I love the fact that Guardians will always just give you their work history and where they come from, because it's like, I'm a task, I get things done, and here's my resume. Okay, which I love. Half people listening go like, that's awesome. Okay, so tell us a bit about what do you do for fun now, or what have you done? You said you did some sports, whatever it is, and outward bound stuff, but just give us a little bit of flavor on the kind of the Rachel who isn't working. What do you do for fun, and what are the things that still bring you life?
That is actually very rare, because everything is associated with work. It just is. But physical, I am quite, even if I'm doing coaching, I will be walking. I will be doing something other than just sitting still and being on the phone. So, but for fun, I mean, adventure camps. I help out with a church adventure camp that I grew up in. I help out with that, and spin classes with thumping music, and that for me is switching off. I know. And if either one of us, my husband and I, have either gone through any kind of stress or anything like that, he will want to take himself off up a hill and stay overnight in a bothy. I book myself a flight and go down to London and party. So we do it separately. I mean, so I always ask people this question, Rachel, is going, so that's so, actually it's very healthy. Some people listening thinking, oh my goodness, who is this person? But actually, when I'm listening I'm listening to the story, I'm listening to go, actually, apart from those early years where in some senses, academic parents who don't get dyslexia wasn't really a thing that anyone really talked about in those days. Everything you ended up doing are actually things that would actually fit the way that you were made to be at your best. The problem is
a lot of the people who are wired as guardian connectors, they don't always fit as easily into the school academic structure, because it's like, well, why am I doing this when I could be actually doing something practical, useful? Why do I need to solve quadratic equations? Because I'm never going to use that again. Throw in dyslexia, I imagine it's a thing. So, so talk to us a bit about how on earth did you get connected to Giant? You've talked a little bit about the voices for you, but a little bit about Giant. And then for you, we'll put up the circles of influence so you can see and go, what's been the biggest aha for you going, I'm a guardian connector and that's meant this? Or with your family, you said with your husband, who's a creative pioneer, some of that. So just a little bit how you got connected to Giant, a little bit about how voices has created some ahas and some breakthroughs for you.
Yeah. I had moved into the coaching world once I decided that, I wore all the hats as a business owner, as you do, and you can't, that's not sustainable. So I found out that actually people development was my thing. And I eventually went and did my CIPD in learning and development. So I spent all these years learning as to who I am to then do a qualification to match who I am. So I did that. And I was talking to a church that I grew up in. I was talking to Dr. Greg Williams, who had come over from the States, who happened to be the president. And I said what I did, and he dug out from his pocket a Giant business card. You need to speak to these guys, he said, because this is what has caused transformation within our organization. And I'm quite sure we could do a whole series on the transformation that happened within that organization. In fact, a drama series would probably be better. So I listened to him. He was very enthusiastic about it. He gave me examples as to how Giant tools had really helped him and his team move forward. So for me, being Guardian Connector, I usually only take the advice from somebody on top.
Of course.
Yeah. And that's what led me to tracking you down on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I remember now.
Yes, and I was then, obviously you said instantly, let's Zoom, because I think it was about 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, hang on a minute, I'm not even dressed. Give me 5 minutes. And I don't think at that point I'd ever used Zoom either, but problem solving, I solved that problem in an instant. So I spoke to you, and then life got in the way for a couple of months or so. And then I did the 5 voices assessment, and I thought, Guardian doesn't really quite, I always say I don't identify as a guardian. I'm probably identifying more as a connector or a pioneer because of the amount of businesses I've set up or the risks that I take. But when you went through that weapon system on email, I went, yes, I interrogate. It's the truth. It's getting to the heart of something, the truth of something. And it's that level of interrogation, especially if I feel as though things around me are not safe or there's stress applied to that. Then it's a case of lock yourselves in, because I'm not leaving without my questions being answered. So it was a big aha moment for me, thinking, oh, right, okay. Yeah,
that's great. And is there anywhere specifically, you talked about a husband being a creative pioneer, any of the kids or any of the work, I'm always interested to hear where kind of those voices ahas of knowing yourself and then actually then engaging with others and going, oh my goodness, this is probably what it's like to be on the other side of me in this context. Any of those particularly come to mind, Rachel?
Yeah, my son is a nurturer creative, which, bless him, he must have an absolute nightmare with the 2 parents that he's got. He is constantly just watching the world around him and watching whatever he says doesn't offend one or the other. And my middle sister is actually a nurturer creative as well. And her and I probably had a very difficult relationship. And I think it was primarily because she sat on the fence, or my viewpoint was that she sat on the fence and didn't say things as it was. For me, it was her being untruthful, So it's really, it was just illuminating. And now, since doing 5 voices and I have that understanding of it, it's like, I'm so sorry. You were actually caring.
And those are the things, Rachel, which I just think are so profound, because you've heard many of my stories, and so is everyone on here. It's almost like we don't mean to miss each other with communication. But actually, if you don't understand how the person on the other side of you is made to be at their best, it's amazing how communication breaks down. And communication breakdown is pretty much at the root cause of most people's pain, whether that's in relationships or business, whatever it is. So I love that. And I love the fact that even now you go, in my parenting, I suddenly realized, gosh, I have a nurturer creative or a little ISFP, who will sometimes fear the interrogation.
Yes.
And it's always then thinking about what does creating environments where people get to be at their best. So that leads me nicely into my next piece that we come to, which is really, whereas I almost go, part of me doesn't really want to be your boss, but I go, all right, then I'll have a crack at it and go, if we talk about saying that the goal of leadership is to create a context and a culture where we can be truly liberating for those we lead, and where we're able to calibrate high support and high challenge to help you almost go beyond what you think you're capable of doing and to take all the opportunities that are there. This is just one of those ones, because everyone listening will either know a person like you, or they'll maybe have children who are guardian connectors, or they'll know someone in your world. So we're going to use you, Rachel, as our kind of lab rat, as it were, to go help us understand, try and, I guess, ignore the dyslexia, because that's something which is particular to you.
Yes.
And actually think about, as a guardian connector, what does high support look like if Steve was my boss? And how would you want me to bring high challenge in a meaningful way? And we'll play a bit of color commentary backwards and forwards on this. So give us some thoughts that hopefully you've been already thinking about.
Yeah. The support is very much what I find is a lot of people say, oh, but Rachel, you're good at everything. So they tend to hang back on the support side of it. And actually, sometimes, in fact, many times, it's just a word of encouragement that sometimes I need, just to make sure I've got that tick box. I can tick off, right, okay, that was okay. It's not just in my head. So I do need that tick just to say, yes, you did okay, you did great, or, but it also needs to have a bit of a foundation, because I can sniff out something that's false. So it has to be truthful with a little bit of foundation as to why it was good and why you feel the need to encourage me at that particular point.
Yeah.
The challenge, I don't honestly need a lot of challenge, because I challenge myself constantly, and it can feel quite, I create my own fear, culture of fear within myself.
Right.
So I really don't need it coming from anybody else on top of that. However, sometimes there is maybe that showing me the way, or showing me, or reminding me that I need to ask maybe more questions rather than telling people how to do things. And that's one of the biggest things, because I can see the bigger picture. And that's why sometimes I say I don't identify as a guardian, because I'm not always in the present. So long as I can quickly tick off that checklist and get into the future as quickly as possible, into that bigger conceptual thinking. So I don't really need a lot of challenge. I need more questions, softer questions, rather than you need to do this or do that, or because I've usually got the answer anyway buried somewhere.
So here's something that I'll try out on you, and you can go. So if I'm dealing with a guardian connector, and I'm thinking about how do I create the environment for them to be at their best and fulfill, the first thing I would always try and create for you is variety.
Yes.
And new opportunity. So I know you're going to get bored doing the same thing each day very, very quickly. But the love of mastering new skills and actually enjoying that practical challenge of being able to make a difference for people in the moment means I can put you into any environment and you will happily help solve the problem for people. So I know I need to create environments for variety, troubleshooting, and where you get to demonstrate the competence that you've already mastered.
Yeah.
Because that in itself is it. Some people be terrified going into a day going, I don't know what I'm going to deal with. But with you, actually go, once you trust the skill sets, you'll go, put me into any environment. I'll really enjoy connecting with the individual, serving the individual, and creating, as it were, a customer success story. So that's one mindset piece. Would that be right?
Yes, give me project-led things rather than day-to-day tasks. So it's a project where I can see the end.
Yeah.
And I will usually step in and do it. So like the call center, I would come in, do the calls myself to then form all the systems and processes and the training to then train the staff, put the staff to it, and then eventually I can step back. But I need to know the ins and outs, the whole workings of the system.
Yes.
And then I'm happier then stepping back. But there has to be a start, middle, and end. Otherwise, my first boss said, this is a nightmare to keep you. I know that I need to keep engaging with you and stop you from being bored.
So that's a really helpful piece as well, because boredom is never going to work. And I would also say that not just variety in work, same skill sets that you happily hone and refine, but different challenges. The other, I think you alluded to, was I would always look to create variety in terms of place and physical environment. And in many ways, anywhere that is the opportunity for adventure and travel will usually be something which is like right in the sweet spot of a Guardian connector, because it's almost like that restlessness for life, that actually, how do I experience as much of it as possible, where actually I can, in many ways, never get tied down to a specific long-term job, never get tied down to a place, because the moment I know the walls feel like they're coming in on you, that's the moment where it's like, and paralysis kicks in. And usually what that means is you would run without any real fear or without any real thought about what I'm going to do in the future. What I know is this doesn't fit me anymore.
Yeah. One word, lockdown.
So if you think about it, the need for adventure, variety, experience, and critically with people. So in a sense, you usually find that, this is I'd be encouraging you to go and do the adventure.
Yeah.
So to go and ski a mountain, go and climb or whatever it is, because what I know is that's where you come alive with the people you enjoy doing that with. So there's, and the other thing I'd be keenly aware of is I would have to be competent enough that you wanted to learn from me and respected my professional skill sets and competence in leading you, because otherwise you'd be a nightmare.
Yes, I would. If somebody doesn't have credibility, then I'm not likely to listen to you at all. Yeah.
And so therefore, for me, knowing that if I win that level of influence with you, then actually you alluded to that kind of sense of wanting to always get it right. It's not you need praise from everybody, but you need encouragement from the voices whose competence you really value. Yes. So I can actually have a really significant influence in your life once you trust I'm for you and I'm competent and can help develop your skills, because ESPs always want to grow their skills, but they always want to grow them based on what they've already mastered. Yes. So it's like incremental learning. So rather than just go, hey, Rachel, why don't you go and try this? You're like, well, hang on, I've never done that before. Versus what's the next progression? So if I'm your boss, I'm actually doing the thing that you don't do as well, which is with a creative as the fifth voice. I'm going, okay, Rachel, what are we looking into the future for you? What does next look like? What does growth look like? And how do we begin to plot out what another 12-month, 18-month, 3-year plan could look like? Because your tendency will be to excel in the present, to win in the present, but really not think a great deal about the future.
No. No, that's absolutely spot on. I mean, I'm the kind of person that will book flights, and if I get an opportunity to, I think there was one time to go to California to go and learn from the best, I did it in 24 hours and off I went. And, my husband and my son actually as well think, what are you doing now? But that's where I learn, and I come alive. Life's too short, not to do these things. That's my mantra, And
that's you being you. And I think it's why these interviews are so helpful for people, because people who are completely different are listening to this and all they're hearing is like reckless, irresponsible, lack of future direction. And what they're hearing, though, is they're hearing you describe a way of life which is actually liberating for you.
Yes.
And all it does every time when people go like, Steve, how do you know all these things? I go, well, I spent 20 years learning how to do it. But the advantage is everyone is getting the kind of front row seat to listen to what it's like to live inside a Guardian Connector's world. And the fact it's probably different from many of you listening is actually another one of those reminders of going, if you lead others the way you'd want to be led yourself, you will get it wrong about 90% of the time.
Yes.
But if you're prepared to ask somebody, help me understand, how do I do high sport, high challenge well? You actually get to a place where the person goes, well, you may not know everything that Yoda knows, but you're actually at least going to ask. And here's the other thing that I would always say to someone like you, Rachel, is go, I'm going to put structure around your professional advancement, because if I don't do it, you won't.
Yeah.
So the stretch in terms of the challenge with you is to go, help me understand some of the things that you'd really love to see happen in your future. They're usually things like adventure, houses, holidays you want to go on. They're not actually thinking, I need to be doing X, Y, Z, but it's also the ability to help you put some stepping stones in place for skills development, and usually the ability to begin to plan, not towards the job, because that's usually dull. The motivation is the outcome of what you can do with the resources and the opportunity and the time that structure creates.
Yeah, no, definitely. I can see that. I think recently, in recent years, when I talk about credibility, I had to look at my own credibility as well. And I think that's where I ended up going through a whole process of getting my CIPD in learning and development, because, you know, the people that I want to work with and that I want to liberate, you know, are business owners, they're CEOs. They need that challenge from somebody like myself, but I need to have that underpinning. Yes, I've got years and years of experience, but I just needed that credibility. So I went out and did that. And that's why I did the coaching accreditation with Giant. I go through all that list of all the different things. So the Sherpa training, the 5 voices, the guides, you know, so so that actually gave me structure.
Yes.
But you're right. When I'm dreaming in the future as to what my work life is going to be like, or even at other parts of my life, I will tend to focus on work, and it's traveling the world for work. You know, I love community, so long as it's a big community and it's a global community.
Yeah.
You know.
And my last one on challenge, and then we'll talk a little bit about what it's like to parent somebody who's different to you, because I think that's one of the things that's come out of what you said. Is the other thing I'd say, Rachel, is to go, I would basically hold you to ruthless deadlines and give you no margin of error whatsoever. Because in the end, I would also, if you're leading other people, help you understand that the fact you are amazing at pulling it off at the last minute doesn't always feel like liberation for the people who are working with you, who actually needed your input last week in order that they could hit their deadline. So in a sense, the thing people miss with a Guardian Connector is, if there is respect, so by this stage you go, wow, Steve, honestly, I could cope with probably you being my boss. You're a bit like a stallion. They don't really want to be ridden by anybody, but if you are, you better know what you're doing, and you better be in for the ride, because at times I'll try and kick you off. But actually having somebody who knows well enough to know the deadlines are not movable, and there will be penalties if you miss them. And that's not just the deadline of the project, it's the deadline that's going to be liberating to your peers, because ESTPs or Guardian Connectors undermine their influence with those around them when their own last minuteness and love of the adrenaline rush of the 24 hours all the way through the night to get it done. There are many, many people, half the voices world, for them that is massively stressful. Because you can do that, it's part of your superpower, but it's not the superpower of everybody.
No. And that is something that I've had to learn. When I obviously I had the team of 20, it was, I realized I had to do things far more in advance for the team to grasp it, be happy with it, be on board with it. And I think loyalty is a big thing for me, and trust is a huge thing for me. So building that loyalty and trust I did learn through my own business that I absolutely had to go way before the deadline. That's not to say I always do it,
No.
but yes, I do it more now.
And the last thing I do for you, Rachel, is I would put you in charge of any of the team celebrations and adventures and parties. I will give you the budget and I will tell you, go and make it the most amazing experience that we will always remember as a team or group of people. And for some people, that's like, oh, no, not another responsibility. But everyone can see by the look on your face, it's like, oh, my goodness. Yeah. You might look at me and go, Steve, how dangerous is it allowed to be?
Yes.
And I would go, well, just think of some of the nurturers in the team who'll be doing the risk analysis as we do it. But think of how we can create a memory that is in the moment as a people and a team that we're always going to remember. And those are the sort of things that if you've got Guardian Connectors in your world, they love doing those sort of things.
Yes.
But back to you and thinking about a teenage version of a Guardian Connector who isn't always a huge lover of operating procedures in schools. Or if they can't see the point of doing something, they can be very stubborn of going, I don't want to do it. And trying to tell a Guardian Connector, you have to do this, is very unlikely to cause a positive outcome because there is a strong resistance to being told what to do. And there is usually, I will fight you to the death on this one if you push me, and whatever sanction or punishment you offer, I will take it rather than simply complying to something I don't believe is true.
Yeah. I think that's possibly why I left home at 17.
but there are a lot of Guardian Connectors out there. You're not common in the giant world because it's far too esoteric, but actually there's a lot of people in the population, and a lot of you have sons and daughters who are wired that way. So just beware, you trying to tell them how to fit into your purpose-filled mold of what you think your perfect child is going to be, usually will end in tears and rebellion and regret. So if you've got a Guardian Connector, if you a bit like horse whispering, if you go head on at the horse and tell them what to do, they will fight you.
Yeah.
But if you come tangentially and invite them into your world, you can create a way where they go, how do I help you win? Even if it looks different to the world that I live in. So anyway, that I hope, Rachel, is brilliant, because everyone who watches these things often sends people to go, okay, if you want to understand how to deal with a Guardian Connector, here's a way, here's 15 minutes of gold. And it's not just Yoda saying, oh, this is who they are. It's you reacting as I do these things and talk with you. So here's the question then I always ask people, would you trust me to be a good boss and be a liberating leader for you in light of what I've just described?
Of course, because you're the expert.
Well, there you go. For a Guardian, to establish that level of credibility with the Guardian, Rachel, is good enough. We'll move on. So, so you probably have already told us a bit about this, but I always say to people to dream as big as you want. If basically money was no issue, whatever funding and resources we needed were available through Giant Bank, and whatever network of relationships and influence we needed in the world to make things happen was available, what would you most love to do if I was going to be a partner and bring all those things into the equation? So what are some of those dreams? What are some of those passions? And not just what you're doing at the moment, okay? Because I know that's the tendency of my Guardian Connectors. I'm changing the parameters, that money's not the issue, that resource is not the issue, that connections are not the issue, but I want to do something with you that you want to do for the next 20 years.
Yeah. I think, Steve, you plugged into exactly what made me tick when we did our first Zoom. And it's things that are big that really sing to me. And especially through my own experience, sustainability and scalability are the two things that are a must if you want to truly help as many people on this planet as possible. And that's what's in my heart. It happens to be entrepreneurs, business owners, especially pioneers in this changing world of work where everything is much more team-based. So you can see pioneers in particular. It's just a case of my team are not doing as I say. It's like, that's because they need to feel heard from you. And of course, they've gone into business thinking about their product or their service and not necessarily this extra thing of people and what actually makes their business great. It's not the thing or the product or the service that's actually going to make the organization great. It's the people. And that's not what they're the expert at. And, you can see business owners burning out. They've got a heart for changing the world in their field, but they need help and support. And I've been there. I've worn all the hats. I've been under the desk on a Monday morning fixing the IT because there's been an update during the weekend, or it's doing all these things, to the marketing, to the client liaison, making sure that everything's running smoothly for the client and they're happy, the sales. So it goes on. But at some point, you have to take some of those hats off and learn to be able to delegate and build those relationships. So, yeah.
That's great. So here's what I can see, Rachel. So can I see that future of you being a hugely competent, highly experienced, working with a small number of people? Because in the end, you are a finite resource. Okay. My experience is I can't work with more than 4 clients at a time.
Yeah.
Well, you're obviously more gifted than I am as an ESTP. You'll do it more. I'll give you an extra one, so 5.
Yeah.
So my question is to you: you becoming an elite coach performer, I'm good with. You're probably already there. But my challenge as the pioneer to my Guardian Connector is to go. You talked about wanting to scale and sustainability. So rather than you just being someone who just charges eventually whatever you can for your time, how do we scale what it is you love to do?
Well, that's what made me sign up with Giant, and it's all about your platform. It's all about that platform, and it's the fact that you can white label it as an organization. You can reach as many teams as possible. So yes, I will work with the executive of that team to then filter down throughout their teams. I'm using the platform. So that just sung to me when you first had that Zoom with me, was the fact that here's this platform that deals with all of the challenges, because as you go further down into the organization, I know that's what drains me. I don't have the capacity for that time or energy or the natural side of caring. I want to work with a handful of highly productive people that can then filter down the teams, and hand in hand with Giant, it works.
I always love it. You see, here's the difference in a Guardian Connector and some of the other Guardians. So once Guardians believe that something is true, trustworthy, reliable, and they have empirical data that it actually works, the connector kicks in. And it's almost like we have this incredible, almost like schizophrenia of going, because usually the Guardian and the connector are often nemesis voices.
Yes.
But in your own head, you go, I have done my due diligence. I've asked all my questions. I believe. Therefore, I'm now going to connect this to the world. So, yes, I agree with you. However, what I would say is that where I've watched Giant work best as a partner is where we have high touch and high tech.
Yes.
So in a sense, I've still got you working with 5 executive teams, scaling through the organization, because what I'm really challenging my Guardian Connector, solo mountain climbing maverick, is to go, how does Rachel take on the apprenticeship responsibility at some point to go, how do you have a team that you actually invest in who are able to do more? Now, I'm never going to challenge you to build a team of 100 people because it would kill you. But the thing I will always say to the Guardian Connector is to go, taking on something of the apprenticeship challenge is going to grow a skill set that you probably won't grow without help.
Yeah.
But actually, your ability to work with more organizations and be more economically successful, by the way. So there's a good motivation for my Guardian Connector is to go, are there 3 people in the next 3 years that actually will go through maybe guidance with Giant who you say, actually, I'm going to use you in my world? Because what that means then is you've actually got to generate more work than you can do. Or more importantly, you manage the senior relationship. They work with the team and the organization. So that's, as Yoda, I'm always going, yes, I could see you doing that. And I know it's your passion. It has been ever since we first met. But it will still be the case of going, I will always be asking you, but you're the one who wants to talk about scalability. So how do you actually do the discipline of having somebody close enough to you that you have to waste time with them to multiply your skills, which I know it feels like, Stephen, you're slowing me down. I'm not going to go as fast as I want to the frontier. And I'm going, sometimes you have to go slower to go faster. So master your skill sets, work out what you do, but never forget that multiplication is deeply attractive in the people we work with. So you will be more attractive to a CEO and someone you want to coach when they can see that you've done what it is we're challenging them to do with their team of multiplication. So some people listening go, Stephen, you're being very hard on Rachel, but the thing with Rachel is most people never say this to Guardian Connectors because you can do everything. Yes. But it's almost like, I always ask, is that a clear enough challenge that you go, okay, Steve, I will take you on that? Yes.
No, it's very clear. It's very clear. It's having those people, because sometimes you think as a Guardian Connector that you can do everything yourself. And I've made that error before. So it's one that is on the tick list that's been ticked. So
there you go. So whenever I see you in Slack channels or in communities or any of your friends who listen to this, always go, Rachel. So it's not what are you going to be doing in 10 years' time, to go, what's your current plan for multiplication? I don't even mind if you add them one at a time. Yeah. But what I know is that basically I've always got groups of people around me in different orbits because it sharpens my skills. Yes. And in some senses, it's also the most rewarding because it's the thing that most leaders and coaches never do. So anyway, that's me being passionate about to you, Rach. So last little bit of the interview, I always say to people is, if you've got Yoda on the line, if you were going, I'd love to process this, or how do I deal with this, or a particular live challenge you're dealing with, is there anything that maybe I can speak into, hopefully add some wisdom to, or you can say, I've got it all sorted, Steve, and we can pretty much draw it to a close. Anything live for you, Rach, that you might value?
I think so long as there's life in my body, you're never ever done learning, or there's no way you can say you're just done. For me, probably kind of building relationships, I usually don't engage unless I trust that person. So transactional. Yeah. So my husband would be, I would get him to do my new business as far as get me out seeing people. But the challenge there would be, I would automatically say, no, I don't want to see that person. No, not that person, not the decision maker. So it's always a case of who is able to connect me to people that I valued and think that could grow this world around me. Does that make sense?
It does. I'll interpret it, and you can tell me whether I got it right. So one of the things that I always, Donald Miller, so let's make sure we give credit where credit's due, is one of the best I know at helping think through marketing and messaging. And he says something which I really have remembered. So thank you, Donald. I appeared on his podcast. And he said, Steve, if you confuse, you lose. And I was like, okay, what do you mean by that? It's not just your clients have to know what you offer, but the people who are going to connect you to opportunities need to know how to do it. So I always say, basically, everyone's going to put you in a box, whether you like it or not. Oh, Rachel's a coach. Steve's a whatever. The question is to go, what I say is, I'm going to define the box I want you to put me in, even if it feels limiting. Now, remember what I said about Guardian Connectors? The thought of being limited, boxed, is literally like kryptonite to their soul. Yeah. But in the end, I found that the most important thing is to go, when I meet somebody who I think really likes me, wants to help me, they usually are asking the question, Steve, what do you do? And I can give them this grandiose title. I'm an organizational consultant. I work with entrepreneurs. And all they hear is, I really like Steve or Rachel. I have no idea what they do. Yeah. It sounds magical,
What I say is I've had to hone it down to go, and I talk about this with the group I have in Giant London. I go, I work with leaders at key transitions in their lives. So they've either sold a business, they're at a career crossroads, or they're on sabbatical wondering what are they going to do with the rest of their lives. We have an amazing process that takes people through a Giant Life Intensive. So, and I walk with them, help them know who they are, what they want to do for the rest of their lives. It's been proven the world over. So here's the thing. Do you know anybody who's in one of those key life transitions that you could actually introduce me to? So I've learned that that's my ask. Now, if somebody says to me, what do you do? In the old days, depending on how the wind was flying, what I was doing, I could give you 50,000 answers, but I was confusing, therefore people didn't know. So now I choose to limit what I say so that people can put me in the box I want to be put in. So the thing I'd say to you, Rach, is go, how do you get more of the right leads? Learn how to equip the people who like you to know how to connect the right opportunities to you. So that's the way I've tried to model and learn from. But wherever you have people that don't like boxes or will like to say, I'll troubleshoot whatever you're doing, you end up confusing people rather than saying, this is what I do. So come back to me. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And actually, I know exactly what it is. It's a case of those business owners, especially coming out of COVID, who have come in and they've got stalled growth and communication issues within teams. Great. So that's exactly my pathway.
Brilliant. So stalled growth and communication in teams are two different things.
I'm not staying in that box, am I?
Well, you've now got two boxes rather than a crate, but learning to craft. So unless you are an organizational, because stalled growth is a big thing.
Yes.
Actually, to say performance of teams, or where is the communication and relational trust issues in teams? That's where I specialize in helping. So it's almost like going, most people coming out of COVID, I promise you, know places where there are communication issues and relational trust. So that's me being a coach to you and going, the more you can narrow it down, and here's the key, say the same thing every time someone asks you. And that will be a challenge for my little guardian connector, because in the end, it's like, what do you do? I specialize in working with elite teams that are dealing with communication and relational trust issues. You'd be amazed then. Everyone goes, oh, I've met one of those. Rachel, I'll introduce you. Anyway, there we go. Rachel, I've just seen the time. You've been awesome. Thank you so much for being my final guest in the Personality Yoda series of interviews. And any final thoughts on you, Rachel, before we go?
No, just a thank you. It's truly been transformational, and the whole tools, and anybody out there, a Guardian Connector says it's transformational, it means it's transformational.
Oh, fantastic. Well, there is nobody on next week. Hope you enjoyed the series. Please feel free to share them. There's lots more on Giant that you can go and have a look at and enjoy all the resources that are there. But for now, we're saying goodbye.